Welcome to Faith Talk with Val
and Sony.
We are a Bible-based podcast where we talk about real life, real struggles, and how faith makes all the difference.
So before we get into today's episode, I wanted to touch base on a part of last week's episode because I've been thinking about it ever since I went back to listen. And I feel like we were missing like a crucial part.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about God's version of love and relationships, but like more than anything, I don't know that we emphasized God's love for us. Like God's love in general and how great and grandiose that is. That being the example, like God literally, John 3:16.
For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever shall believe in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life.
Yeah, like how did we miss that in the episode? Looking back and listening, and I'm like, I know we focused a lot on like God's version of love, but that is key. That like hit the whole reason Jesus came and died for us is God's love for us. So I wanted to go back and emphasize that piece because I think that out of everything, like that's the biggest takeaway. Like God's love for us is so grand, and that's the reason why redemption is possible. That's the reason why you know, all of these things to look forward to are possible because of God's love for us. So many things become a possibility.
Yes.
So I just wanted to go back and point that out because I do think that that is the most important piece of it all. And one of the takeaways that I want everybody to walk away with is when you are abiding in God, when you are spending time with love itself, meaning God, that's how you reflect the fruit.
Yes.
And that's how you portray love unto others. And that's what allows you to receive the right kind of love as well, because you have that foundation.
And that's how you recognize it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that brings me to today's episode. And another verse that comes to mind is Romans 5:8. The gist of it is basically, I loved you at your darkest. So let me actually just read it. Romans 5:8 says, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. At our darkest, sinning, Jesus gave his life for us. And that verse resonates a lot with me given the season that was a few years for me. I think this week's episode is special to me because we are actually nearing the 5-year anniversary of my mom's passing. And so I thought it would be a good idea.
Sony, I feel like it was just yesterday.
Right?
Like not yesterday, but like last year feeling.
It feels so recent. And just given everything that I've gone through, I know that there are people out there struggling. And I feel like understanding it from someone who's 5 years out, maybe in some way might give you a little hope, maybe in some way might give you a little perspective. And not just for those going through it, but for those around you to understand how to better support someone in that season. Because I feel like a lot of times we'll hear verses about it or we'll hear how the Bible ties into it, but like understanding the experience itself. And now that I have a clear mind going back to it, I know there's a lot that I would have done different in the healing process. And I think I would have leaned on God more sooner had I known what I know now.
You mentioned two words together in a sentence that I don't think a lot of us would put together, especially when we're going through something tragic, sad, just miserable. You said grief and hope in the same sentence. It reminds me of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13 through 18. And the gist of that one is kind of like, do not grieve as those who have no hope. I thought grieving means you have no hope.
Yeah.
But God is telling us here, don't grieve as someone who has no hope, because like you can grieve. It's a human emotion, but you should know just by being a child of God, you're entitled to hope.
Yeah.
Which is such a hard concept to understand in the moment.
And this actually just came to mind. I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, how early on when I had just met you, you had made a comment about you're not afraid to die or you're not afraid of that day because you know what comes after that, God, right? And I remember in that season thinking like, that's kind of crazy. Like, who says that? But understanding now, and like through my relationship with God growing, I understand that, and I see the beauty behind that, and I see why that interpretation is so beautiful. And so I remember turning to the Bible, and like one of the verses that I landed on was probably not the best in that specific moment. Let me backtrack. It was the best had it resonated, had I understood it, because it probably would have helped the grief. Is Matthew 8, verse 21 to 22. And it's basically one of the disciples telling Jesus, let me go bury my father, and then I will come and preach the word with you. Jesus replied, saying, let the dead bury the dead, or let the dead worry about the dead. And I remember reading that and being so offended. My mom just died. How dare you? Was like,
how dare you?
Was the thought. And, and I'm not like, wasn't fighting with God or Jesus. It's just, I'm in so much pain. How can someone say, let the dead worry about the dead? My goal with this episode, again, is to help people understand grief. So I'm going to share a bit about that season. And I guess I want to start with telling you a little bit about my mom and the reason why the loss was so heavy for me. So I think my siblings would all agree that I grew up in a bubble, self-made bubble. Maybe my mom made the bubble, who knows? But like, I would not trade my mom for the world. Like, my mom was love. And I like to say that what I inherited from my mom was her heart. And she was just a beautiful soul, full of love. She was the kind of person that would bend over backwards for people and take the shirt right off her back for those in need, and went out of her way to be there for others. And I think she was a great example of love. Even though she had a harsh upbringing, I feel like a lot of people can turn a harsh upbringing and become bitter, or become, have their hearts hardened. But my mom was the opposite. I think she took all of that hurt and all of that pain and turned it into love. And I think that was a reflection that she had on her kids, is be the love that I didn't receive.
I love that.
Yeah. And so for me, I think my mom was definitely mom first, then friend. When I lost her, I remember thinking to myself, I was just starting to understand her. And to clarify, understand her as a woman, her journey, her losses. It's a pain that I don't wish on anyone.
Yeah.
And you can say, some aren't as close to their mom, but it's your tether.
Yeah.
And I know God is our foundation, but like, my mom was my person.
Yeah.
Like, even at that age, she was I can run home to.
Like, your safe space.
It was my safe space.
Yeah.
Still. And so losing that safe place, losing that tether, I was at a loss for life. It happened out of nowhere. It was unexpected. It was such a deep, heavy loss, but that was only the beginning of that season. This was 2021, so we all know what was going on in that season. At that same time, my dad had Parkinson's, and given everything that was going on, his Parkinson's sped up. And so we lost my dad 39 days after we lost my mom.
Crazy.
I wasn't even done grieving my mom. And 2 weeks into my mom's loss, I remember being in such a dark, heavy place and realizing that my dad had just been
declining.
And the doctor said, like, he's officially going into hospice. Like, there's nothing else we can do. Everything, just the way it developed, was the worst possible way that things could have developed in that season. And I remember thinking to myself, like, God, I cannot do this. I cannot be there for him the way I'm feeling right now. And I specifically remember praying, God, take away these feelings, take away this hurt, because how am I supposed to be there for dad when all I can think about is my mom's no longer here? We actually didn't even tell my dad that my mom had passed for a whole week, because he was in the hospital. He had gone to the emergency room the night before my mom passed. So she passed in the morning. He was in the hospital. So I just remember praying to God, this pain is so heavy. We should be grieving And I can't even focus on giving the respect. I can't focus on giving the grief she deserves. Such an amazing woman just passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And we're moving on in 2 weeks. Like, it felt so unjust. And I'm not saying this has nothing to do with my dad. This is the reality that we were in.
Yeah.
Like, it's been 2 weeks and now doctors are saying my dad's going into hospice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can I have a moment for my mom before? Like, it just felt so unfair
Mm-hmm.
that she didn't. And for some reason, and like, it felt so important to me to give her that
grieving period.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
how are we just going to move on? And obviously, literally, that's not what was happening, but that's how it felt in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. Like, how are we planning hospice for my dad? And I remember praying, like, God, take away this pain because I can't be there for dad. And a little bit of backstory, years ago when I was younger, very go, go, go. And I remember my mom pulled me aside once, and this was specifically, we were traveling somewhere, and like, my grandparents were older, so like, they're a little bit slower and all of that. And my mom pulled me aside. She's like, you need to chill. She's like, I get it. You have an agenda. We have places to be, like,
Mm-hmm.
but you respect the elderly. And not that I was being disrespectful to them, but I was clearly showing signs of like impatience. Like, can we just all get in the car? Like, why are we moving so slow?
You
like,
impatient?
right? No. and so I remember her pulling me to the side and saying, relax. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you need to show grace. How you see them one day, you will be just like them. So treat others the way you want to be treated. Even if you're not in that season, you will be in that season one day.
Mm-hmm.
And she was so kind and gentle about it, but like, still saying like, chill, get it together, because you know, these are her parents. And that's one thing I'll say about her. Despite everything she went through, like, she did teach us to respect and love them. And I remember that coming to mind when I prayed, like, God, I need to be here for dad, and I can't be here for dad the way I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
And I remember in that season when he was in hospice, everyone around us was grieving. My brothers were grieving. My sister was grieving. Like, mom just passed away. My grandparents were grieving. So like, no one
had like a clear head.
No one had a clear head. No one.
Gosh.
It was like exhaustion. And then we were told that dad had to go into a recovery center after he was released from a week of being in intense care. And that's when his Parkinson's developed extremely fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so he stopped being able to move. So the rehab center was supposed to get him back to mobility. However, if we checked him into the rehab center, he wasn't going to be allowed to go to the funeral. So that week, we made the decision that he would come home with us for a week.
Mm-hmm.
And the social worker specified, we'll come visit frequently. And if he's not being taken care of, we're going to have to step in and take him to the rehab center. But we wanted him to go to the funeral. And fortunately, God is so great. At the time, a friend of mine, who was my roommate in that season, she had just finished nursing school and she didn't have a job yet. So for that month that she hadn't found her place yet, God worked in her heart, and she's like, hey, I'll come help. I'll come to your sister's even though it's 2 hours away. And so she came, and during that week before the funeral, we took shifts, and you're supposed to move somebody to avoid bed sores, to avoid infections, all of that. And I remember my mom's words, like, be compassionate. And every time I was helping dad and doing like the stuff that we're supposed to do at home for someone, this was before they told us he was going to hospice. At this point, we still thought there was hope and he was going into the rehab center in a week. For that week, the three of us, every 2 hours, we would take turns. Two of us would go and do everything that needed to be done. Shift and pillows and meds and feedings and all of that for a whole week. The three of us. Just the three of us. And thank God for her that she had her nursing license and she knew what to do. And with the help of the nurses that would come from the social worker, you know, we had all of the guidance that we needed. And I can proudly say when we did finally check him in after the funeral, they were so impressed that he didn't have any bed sores. He didn't have any, like, we took the best care. And even my nieces who were at home, they would take turns feeding him, and you know, just they took pride in like, I can do this for grandpa, and like, oh, I can do this. And it was kind of like we came together, and he had the best care. He felt loved during all of that. And then it was the worst possible decision to be convinced to let him go into rehab because they were not doing what they were supposed to do. He's in rehab and they don't take care of him. And he went in for physical therapy and came out with renal failure. And we couldn't see him. We were only allowed to see him through a window because of everything that was going on that year. And I remember going back and realizing like he literally looks like he's still in the same position as when I saw him yesterday.
That's scary.
It was scary. And I remember calling because they wouldn't even let us in the building. And I remember calling and like nobody would answer. So finally I called a social worker and she's like, I actually have a visit today. You could meet me there. I'm like, I am already here. I will be here when you get here.
Yeah.
And so I was only able to get in the building because of her. And mind you, the prior week, we had been doing all of the physical therapy. We had been doing all of the, you know, moving and all of that. So I knew what it was supposed to look like. So when the social worker's doing her check, we realized everything that was wrong. So she's asking questions and I made a note. I made it a point to mention, like, when he checked in, he didn't have any bed sores. He didn't have any of this because we were taking good care of him at home. And so, like, all of that to say, the only way to release him was I actually ended up having to call 911 and saying, I need an ambulance and we need emergency transport to the hospital. And that was the only way I was able to get him out of that place. Get to the hospital for the doctors to tell me that he needed multiple rounds of emergency dialysis because basically he sat there for days with and the condition that he was in, it was crucial. He wasn't eating, he wasn't drinking, he wasn't,
like, his body was shutting down.
His body was shutting down and they were doing nothing about it. Like, in my mind, like, hello, hook him up to an IV. Like, how do we go from physical therapy to renal failure? Make that make sense, right? And so I think another week or two in intensive care at the hospital. Thank God that specific hospital understood what my family was going through. So they did allow us to see him and they did see the value in him having the moral support and somebody in the room. It was limited. I think only one of us could visit at a time, but they saw the value in that. And so they allowed us to be there with him. And when he finally had to go to hospice care, we ended up bringing him back to my home. And at this point, everyone's exhausted. Everyone's exhausted. Everyone is not thinking straight. I think we held it together for mom's funeral. Decisions were made, arrangements were made, and I think we held it together very admirably given how rapidly it happened. By the time that we were planning Dad's funeral, emotions were high.
Everyone was just raw. You never had healing time.
There was no healing time. It was conversations that could have waited were being had. Conversations that had no room at the table were brought up. And in the moment, I remember thinking, I hate all of you. All of you are inconsiderate. All of you are missing the point of what's important right now. That was also grief talking. And I realize now that some of the stuff that was said or was brought up was them grieving as well. And I'm talking about siblings and grandparents and like our core family. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't want to be around everyone. I would actually rather it be me and the social worker and my sister here at home dealing with all of this than having to give everybody updates and like And then that's the other thing. I feel like this needs to be said for those of you who maybe have similar situations, because there's always one person in the family, quote unquote, takes charge, or maybe not even willingly, but like is appointed to be the one who gives everybody updates.
Yeah.
So I was the person. And anyone will tell you I take great notes. And like you will know every detail if I'm the person taking the notes. Like you will be up to date. And I would send these long texts so that everybody was in the loop. Everybody knew what was going on. Everybody knew what's happening tomorrow, what meds have been had, what updates there have been. But then when you send that text, everyone starts calling with questions. Everyone starts calling with opinions. Everyone starts calling with thoughts.
Oh no, you're like, I'm just the messenger.
Forget being the messenger. The person doing that cannot be the person who's also holding everybody's hand. Like you cannot. And I say this with passion now, having been in that situation. And mind you, like I'll come back around to like the grace behind it and understanding. But like, let me just be in this moment for a second to help others understand that you need to have grace for the person who is trying to keep everyone on the same page, and understand that sometimes you just need to read the text and like get the info you need from that, or show up. There's no, well, you're there, you should answer the questions. No, you need to show up and be there and like make your own conclusions, because the other point of that is there is right and wrong, but there is no black and white. It's things are developing in the moment. So some things you can't answer. Some things are opinion based. And I remember thinking to myself, like, the doctors would say something and I was full of hope. Oh, well, they said this is a possibility and that's a possibility, and therefore there's hope. But then you have the skeptic side of it. No, Sonia, you need to accept that Dad is passing, and they're literally telling us that this is going to happen. And we both heard the same information. We both heard the same words from the doctor, but my perception was, but he said there's hope.
Focusing on the positive.
If this 1 in a million things happens, there is hope. But everybody else in the room was hearing like, no, he's literally saying it's not likely that 1 in a million thing can happen.
You're like, he said there's 1% hope. And other people are like, but he said 99% no.
And so for me, it was like, did we not hear the same thing? Like he said, there's hope, you know? And so all that to say, like, the only reason I'm bringing that up is it's grief. It's hope. It's where you are personally that's going to determine how you digest that information.
Yeah.
And I think that understanding that might help you in that situation, because families, when you're under the knife, when you're in that kind of pressure, you don't know what's coming. You don't know what information is more important than other information. And it was just very heavy to be dealing with all of that, on top of the fact that I'm still grieving my mom. I'm still trying to grieve my mom. Fast forward, all of this is going on. The support from the people that I thought would be there wasn't necessarily there. And that was also piling on. Like those emotions of like, where is my tribe? Where's my support system? Yeah. Everything developed as we expected it to. And, you know, Dad's funeral. And I remember when the casket went down, finally crying.
Like we're holding it
I was holding it in the whole time. So 39 days from when my mom passed away, my dad passed away, and then he was buried maybe a week later. And I remember when the casket went down, finally being able to breathe and like, I don't have to be strong anymore. I got us here. Not just me, obviously, but like I'm speaking from my experience, but like we got here, and like now I can breathe. Now I can let it out. Now I can grieve my mom and my dad together. And that's when the darkness set in.
Yeah.
That's when like all of the emotions came through. I remember just thinking to myself, like, how robbed of a proper goodbye. She had a beautiful funeral. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But like her funeral, just to show you how loved she was, I remember going up there and reading the eulogy, and I sat in the front. I don't know who showed up. I just sat in the front. Whoever came to say hello said hello, but I never looked back. And when I went up there to read the eulogy, I was just like facing my little sheet of paper, and I remember looking up and like seeing a room full of people that had shown up just to say their goodbye, and estimating there was probably 300 people there who flew in from different states, who some of them came from out of the country just to visit her because she had made such an impact and she was so loved by so many. And I remember the room being so full that there was literally people standing outside in the lobby.
So beautiful.
And then my brother saying like, no, there's actually people in the parking lot as well. Just like, just how amazing, you know? And that brought me so much joy and comfort, just knowing like, okay, they saw it too, right? Like they knew how great, they knew how amazing she was. And like seeing all of these people show up just for moral support. And then like, that was it. She got that one day. And then it was like back to back tragedy in the family. So when we finally like buried Dad, I remember telling myself, I've been the go-to person in this family for so long. And the fact that everyone was turning to me in this moment of grief, knowing how close I was to Mom, I resented it. I resented it. And I remember thinking to myself, I am going to give myself 1 year to just fall apart, and we'll see how low this gets, but I don't care. I was blessed enough to have, quote unquote, the luxury to just fall apart. I know that's not an option, but I literally gave up on life, on everything. I remember, I think I shared this with you before. If anyone out there is a cartoon artist and feels like drawing this, I would love to have this in some form of like artistic,
just medium.
Yeah. But like, I remember thinking like anime, this image just kept popping in my head of like this girl on the floor, everybody taking, emotionally, taking financially, taking, just taking. I felt so depleted. I had nothing left to give, but everyone kept turning to me for support in one way or another. And I remember a friend of mine, my roommate, actually the one who's a nurse, saying, but how beautiful that in their time of need, they see you as a light and they come to you. And I'm like, that's beautiful. But to be fair, she didn't say that during the season. She had said that before, but that came to mind. But I remember thinking to myself, like, where's my light? Like everyone's just taking this deep-rooted resentment. Now I realize that it wasn't hate, it was hurt. But in the moment, I felt that I hated everyone.
And it was also like exhaustion.
It was a lot of exhaustion. Yeah. Like lack of sleep, and I'll get into that in a second. But I remember thinking to myself, like this image, like everybody's pulling, everybody's taking, and like the signage around it was like, give me, and like, I want this, I want that. And me just being like, I have nothing left to give, leave me alone. And I stopped showing up in life in every way possible. A little bit of backtrack. I remember there was a moment, because I worked at home, and I remember there was a moment where I'm on a call, and it's like the ideal call in the business. Like everything you could possibly hope for on a call is lining up perfectly. And all I could think of was my dad is literally in the other room in hospice, and he could pass away any moment, and I'm here working. And my leave of absence hadn't been approved yet. And I remember hanging up that call and calling my manager and saying like, I can't do this. And I was like, I'm going to clock out, and I'm not clocking in tomorrow. And it is what it is. If you need to let me go, I'm okay with that. I cannot do this. Like that is more important. And bless his heart, he's like, take a breath. He's like, it's the end of your shift. You're fine. Do what you have to do. Don't just throw in the towel. He's like, it's getting handled. The next morning, my leave of absence got approved, And like, I think I've mentioned this in a previous episode, like work was probably one of the places where I received the most grace. The next morning, my leave of absence to be his caregiver got approved. And then he passed away. So then, like, that was a whole nother ordeal. Then I eventually got another leave of absence for mental health reasons. Like, it was just a lot. But just, I was so thankful that I was able to be present versus like working. Going back to feeling like so depleted and exhausted, my support system was also grieving. So I couldn't lean on them. They were grieving just as bad as I was grieving. And that's when my friends kicked in. I was so blessed. And I am still so blessed to have the friendships that I have in my life, because I feel like had it not been for the friends and the circle around me, I don't know that I would have made it out of that season. And there's this reel that I saw back then, and it's this little boy. I think it's a little boy. Maybe it was a little girl. And they're in this like gymnastics competition.
Okay.
Or maybe he was trying to cut a wood beam.
Yes, I think I've seen it.
So it's like such an uplifting video.
Yeah.
So I don't remember if he was like trying to do.
He was trying to like karate chop a beam.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
So he couldn't do it, and like you can tell he's just like losing all confidence, and he's just like
tired,
and he's like about to cry, and all of his little classmates circle around him like a little circle of protection, and they all just start like chanting for him. I don't know what they're saying. You can't, it's not audible in the video, but like they start chanting for him and they cheer him on and they encourage him, and then they all go back to their place, and like that was enough. Next chop, he cut that board.
They were like giving him like energy or something.
They just uplifted him, right? And so going back to the drawing, if anyone ever wants to draw this for me, I need 2 images. One, when everyone's taking, and then the other one where the friends came in, drew a circle of protection around me. And like that was the grace and the space that I needed to heal. And I say that because I remember just like secluding myself. Once my leave got approved, the only people who saw me were my sister, my counselor, and my roommate. Like every now and then, you know, I'd see my other siblings and all of that. But like I remember just not wanting to see anyone, not wanting to talk to anyone. I remember like those who did want to come near and like see me and be there for me, I'm like, you can come over, but I don't want to talk. Like, do you want to sit in silence? Because that's all I have the energy for. And I remember one time my brother, grieving also, please make dinner for me. Please, let's just have a meal together. Let's just, you know, I just need to be around someone. And I remember being so annoyed. How dare you ask me to cook right now? Like, I see his hurt now, but in the moment, I just remember thinking to myself, like, how selfish of you, you know? But no, he was hurting. He needed someone. To be fair, his request was not that, he wasn't asking for like a 3-course meal. He's like, cup of noodles for all I care, but can we please be together and mourn for a moment together? And so I remember, like, this is another takeaway for those of you who do have someone in your life who is grieving. You don't need to say anything. Your presence is probably more impactful than anything you can say. And there's a verse in Job 2, it's verse 13. And it says, then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. That verse is basically Job's friends had come to visit. And the story of Job, just to refresh everyone's memory, he was a man who lost everything. He lost his wealth. He lost his children, his home. He was stricken with disease. He lost everything. And in that moment, his friends knew that there was nothing they could actually say except for sit there in his mourning and in his grief with him. And that alone was uplifting. I will say, friends gave him bad advice later on, but like that one verse always stood out to me, because I remember that same roommate, I'm on the couch watching TV like mindlessly, like I'm just sitting there, I'm not actually even paying attention. And she comes down and she starts a conversation, and I'm just like, I can't. Like, I literally don't want to talk right now. And so she apologized. She knew what I was going through, but I remember apologizing after the fog of it all, because I remember like how rude I must have been in that season. And I remember her apologizing and saying like, oh, it's okay. Like, I'll give you your space. I'll just go upstairs. And I remember like flat out saying like, no, I didn't say you should leave. I don't want to be alone. I just don't want to talk. So here I am like with this like clearly unstable mindset. And she's like, okay. So she like sits down awkwardly, like, I'll sit with you. And we just sat there in silence. But like there was that comfort of, I'm not alone. I don't want to talk. I have nothing to say. Like holding a conversation felt impossible, but I didn't want to be alone. And like, so she sat with me, and I'm so thankful that she saw beyond my rudeness in the moment. She saw beyond, you know, anything that I possibly said, and just sat with me in silence. And I remember another group of friends, my other close friends, they would check in with me consistently months after everything had happened. And I remember this because everybody checks in with you a few weeks in, maybe even a month out. But like, there was a handful of people who have reached out on the anniversaries of their loss every year. And the fact that like they bothered to put that in their calendar to reach out is so sweet and so meaningful to me, that they know what a rough season that was. And like, even now, when these anniversaries come around, it's hard. Some years it's like joyful remembering them, and some years it's just heavy. And like, they know enough to check in. And it doesn't even have to be anything heavy. It's like, hey, thought of you today. Hey, I know today's a heavy day. You're in my thoughts. That's simple, guys. It's literally that simple. Because the person grieving doesn't always want to say more. I will say, there's things you shouldn't say when someone's grieving. There's things you really should not say when someone's grieving. But I won't focus on that. And instead I'll say, the one thing that I found the most comfort in during that season was when people would ask to hear about them. And the first person who said something along those lines was, I had just moved into that house. And when Mom passed away, we were going back to my sister's. So we packed the car, we were loading the car, and the neighbor happened to be out in their front porch. And she walked over to introduce herself. And she's like, oh, hi, you know, new neighbors, I'm so-and-so. And like, our faces said it all, like full of grief, tears. And, you know, we're loading the car to go back to my sister's where my nieces were. And so she asked what was going on. And we told her. She prayed over us in that moment, like, God bless her. And she said, I know it's a rough time right now. Whenever you're up for it, I would love to hear about your mom. So timely. So timely. And like, that just warmed my heart, because she was the first person who said that. Everybody else made comments like, she's with God now, or she's in a better place now. That is not comforting. Please don't say that to people. It is not. I understand the warmth behind it. I understand it's good intended, but it is not comforting. She's in a better place. Excuse me. Like, I just lost my mom. Why would you think that's going to be comforting? She was in the best place with me. Right. And obviously I get where all of the sentiment and all of that's coming from, but like, it's not. What did bring me joy was you wanting to hear about her, you wanting to get to know her, even though she's no longer here. And like, that was comforting, to be able to share stories about her. And in the time that passed, it was actually so beautiful to hear other people's stories about her, because I got to know a side of my mom before kids came, that I didn't know in that kind of detail. And that was really cool, to see old pictures of her in her teens, to see old pictures of, you know, her before kids. And it was just beautiful to see that side of her. So that kind of stuff brought joy too. I know I'm jumping around a bit, but like, going back to the season of darkness, remember, I prayed for God to make my feelings go away and to take the pain away when Dad was sick. After Dad passed, I said, God, there is so much pain in my heart right now. Please make me numb. I said, I can't. Please make me numb. Like, I don't know what to do with all of these feelings. I don't want to feel anything. And I remember my friends seeing how dark it was getting. And they would invite me on hikes and walks and very low effort things. And I remember I would go on hikes and these long walks with them. And there's 2 of them. And they would be talking and chatting and, sharing about life. And they didn't pressure me. If I wanted to talk, I talked. Most of the time, I just walked. And they made space for me. I'm going to cry because I was so blessed to have the friends that I do, because they made space for me to just be there without actually having to participate. But they didn't let me rot. like they forced me out of the house. They forced me to see a little bit of sunlight. And that's the other thing. I remember when I think I lived in that house for maybe 2 months before my mom passed away. And I remember the sunshine before it all happened. All of the windows were open and it was just like a house full of light. After it, I remember when my roommate would open the window, I was like a little vampire, close the blinds. No sunshine in this house.
Leave me here to wallow.
I was like, no light. Light is not welcome in here.
Oh my goodness.
It was dark. The fact that I couldn't see sunshine. Holiday season right around the corner. Worst year of my life. And I remember previous to that, I used to love those Hallmark Christmas movies. I was so jaded. I was like, what is love? I couldn't get through a movie. I couldn't get through anything that was positive because it felt unreal. It felt fake. Everything was just it was dark. And so the other thing I want to point out for people is when you do know someone who is grieving and is going through a dark phase, there's a lot of things that add up. Lack of sleep, you're in your thoughts, you're not resting well. I wasn't eating well either. I wasn't cooking anything healthy. I was ordering in every day or going out for fast food every day, if I went out at all for food. And so that got really, your body cannot handle that kind of diet.
No.
It can't. And just think of what your body goes through when you are consuming that kind of diet, the dehydration. And I later found out that that's actually very common in people grieving, those symptoms of dehydration and your stomach, going through certain symptoms and all of that. And it's because you're not taking care of yourself. But you don't realize that you're not taking care of yourself because you're not tracking your water intake. You're not tracking what you're eating. You're just barely surviving.
Living just feels just existing.
Existing was too much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember everything that I'm mentioning right now all happened within a 3-year time span. So my mom and dad passed away 39 days apart, and then grandpa passed away within a year of mom passing, and then grandma passed away a year after that. So those 3 years of my life were a complete fog. Eventually I got back to work and back into routine, but there are pieces of those 3 years that I don't remember the order. I remember just coasting through it. I was not actively participating in life. I was doing what I had to do. I wasn't living. And I was so mentally checked out that it just, nothing made sense. Nothing mattered. I had no will to live. And I think I've shared this with you before. By that last of the 3 years, I was actively praying daily to die. Every day I would pray, God, if it is your will, if you want to bring me home, I am okay with that. I don't see the purpose of life. I don't know why you still have me here. I don't want to be here. And I keep going back to the prayer that I made. God, don't let me feel anything. And that's exactly what was happening. I'm not saying that God was like, okay, don't feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember having zero emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back at it, there was a moment where I thought to myself, like, I have a Christian friend who didn't reach out much. And then come to realize my poor Christian friend was going through struggles of her own in that season. And I remember, like, I know you went to the funeral. I know you stopped by my place a few times, I think. But we didn't really, like, text a lot, or not that I would answer if you had. But, like, I remember thinking to myself, it crossed my mind. And then, like, I realized that your grandpa passed away, I think a month after my dad, maybe 2 months after my dad did.
He passed away Christmas morning.
So December, yeah.
Yeah. And that was unexpected, but it was just like, it was really interesting because him and my grandma had gone to, like, just like vacation with their friends not too long ago. Like, yes, his health was not great, but it wasn't like alarming.
Yeah.
Or it wasn't like whatever. It was just like, oh, a constant thing. Like, we prayer request, like, it's fine. People get older, they run into, like, health issues, but nothing where, like, this person's gonna die. And I remember Christmas morning, we are, like, opening presents, doing that. I don't think we had opened presents yet. I think we were just finishing, like, eating breakfast. Yeah. And my dad gets a call, and instantly, like, we're just like, what's going on? Because, like, his demeanor changes. And then he, like, puts it on speaker, and it's like, he's like, wait, someone go get a different phone, like, blah, blah, blah. And, like, all these things. And it was like this was like COVID time too. So there was a lot of things during COVID with the hospitals where they didn't let people, like, visit. And it was like basically my grandma trying to say, like, hey, the hospital guys, like, on the line, they didn't have a doctor at the hospital because it was Christmas morning.
Yeah.
So I could only speak to the nurse practitioner. And that guy was like, I remember hearing his voice. It was like so like
non-human,
not urgent. And he's like saying, like, all these things like, oh, we need permission to, like, do this and do that. And then my dad's like, well, my mom wants to, like, be there. Oh no, like, she can't. And, like, all these different things. My grandpa basically died while we were
discussing what steps to take.
Yes, on the phone call. There was a point where we're just like, we actually don't think this guy's doing what he says he's doing. We don't think my grandpa's there, because he's, like, kind of, like, arguing with my dad to, like, do this, do that, do this. And my dad's like, I'm his son, like, whatever. And then he's like, it was like such a weird phone call, because during it was like, oh wait, we can't do anything anymore, he passed. And we're just like, we, like, talked about it as a family afterwards, and we're like, we low-key think he was dead before they called us. They just called us to have something, like, on record for time of death and like for something. But, like, at the end of the day, it's like, you also don't have the energy to fight and be, like, your own advocate, because at the same time you're just like, sue the hospital or, like, do all these things. And, like, yes, it seems, like, logical, but in the middle of someone who's grieving, it's like the last thing.
My therapist actually said that. I went to counseling for a while when I was on leave, and that exact topic came up, because I wanted, when Dad went into renal failure, like, 100% neglect. There's no way around it. It was neglect. And I remember telling him, like, I'm going to sue, and, like, but given everything that was going on, and some things I'm not going to share, but that's only, like, the tip of everything that was going on. There was a lot. And I remember him saying, he's like, Sonia, you don't need something else on your plate right now. Can you just focus on breathing? Can you just focus on wanting to live life again? Can you just take a step to just breathe? Take a moment to just breathe. And I think you're 100% right. Like, you're not in a place to be making decisions. You're not in a place to necessarily advocate for yourself.
And I think that's like one of the things that when grief hits, you could become an advocate, but it's only fueled by anger and grief.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can choose to like heal and figure yourself out. Not saying that you won't have an advocate for that, but you have to trust that God is going to be your advocate. And I know that sounds kind of passive, but it's like when you're going through so much, you really do need to trust in God, or else you can end up in situations where you're just like fueled by anger and grief. And I'm pretty sure like there's a lot of policies that need to change in hospitals, and there's a lot of neglect that happens. But at the end of the day, it's like you have to trust that your loved ones, like even if there was neglect, even if all these things went wrong, at the end of the day, they were under the care of God.
Yeah.
And God would have like spared them the suffering. Like we will never know. We will never know. But because we will never know, we can trust that even when we weren't looking, God was there. And he was looking out for them. And I think that's like super important, because a lot of times I think like, did we drop the ball? Did we like, it was just a lot. But then I'm like, no, I can't go there. I didn't, because if there's one thing that happened during that time, I was like, a lot of us prayed in our own ways. Like I remember like everyone was going through their own thing. Like my dad, it was his dad, like going through his own thing. My mom trying to like be supportive because she had already lost her dad back a couple years ago. So she could relate to my dad a little bit because she knew the pain associated with that. And my sibling, like I think we were all just in our own journey with what was happening. And then also to be there for my grandma, because she's like a widow now.
And she's out there alone, and
she's in a different state. So that was like the whole thing, like a whole nother thing. Because I remember thinking and like talking to God during those times, and I was like, I want to be there for everyone in my family, especially my grandma. There is parts in the Bible that says like take care of like the widows and the children. And I just like feel like I'm dropping the ball here because I'm falling apart. And it's like, I don't feel like we take care of our widows. And I think about that all the time, because I'm just like, I want to be emotionally available. And I think I called my grandma one time and I like explained to her, and I was like, I apologized. And I was like, I know I hadn't called you, but like, I just didn't know how to be there for you, like how to be like the uplifting person that you needed to hear. Because one, I don't understand your situation. I'm not married. I don't have a husband. I don't know what it feels to lose something that I've never had. And also like, I'm trying to process like my own grief. The way, I think it wasn't so much my grandpa passing, it's like the way that it happened on the day that it happened. So I think grieving is like super, very complicated. And it does matter, like your lens. I think you mentioned like you were the positive person. You were trying to see when they were describing situations, you were like, he said there was hope. And your siblings were like, no, he said that was like low chance. And I think that's like the lens that you put on when you're going through grief. It's like the lens of who you are. And I think something that's very important is when you're going through difficult situations to make sure your lens is God. Because when your lens is not God, it can spiral just down.
You just reminded me of something that we talked about when I found out your grandfather passed away. And then I felt awful because like you knew what I was going through, so you didn't even share that your grandfather had passed away. So I'm like, you're going through it and no one's there for you too. But I think when we were having that conversation, we both said something similar. And in the Bible, you hear stories about how faith brought them back to life.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus resurrected the little girl. Jesus resurrected Lazarus.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear these things, and I remember telling you when mom passed away, everyone's just been notified and everyone's making their way to the hospital. But for an hour, I'm sitting there by myself, not knowing that everybody's also at the hospital, but we're all in different places apparently in the hospital. Like there was no communication. We didn't really know who was where. I think I had left my phone in the car. I remember when they finally gave us the news, like I dropped in my seat, like in disbelief. Like this is not reality right now. Like, like had I been there, had I known, you know, the symptoms, pause for a second. If you don't know the symptoms of a heart attack, I think everybody should go read up on the symptoms of a heart attack, because that simple knowledge, I think, would have made a difference. And I'll get back to that piece in a second. But when we were notified, they finally let us go back, you know, to see her and like say our goodbyes. And I remember going in there. I don't think my confidence was what it is now when it comes to Christ, when it comes to God. But I remember being in that room thinking, can you leave? Like thinking to the nurse, like, can you leave so I can pray my mom back to life, like out loud? Like I remember thinking this, and I know it sounds funny or odd, but like I remember standing there and they only let us back in groups, and I forced my way into each little group of us that they let us in. Like I was there all 3-4 times that we went back in there. And each time I'm thinking like she's going to step outside and like I'll be able to do it. Why didn't I just do it in front of her? Right. But I remember thinking to myself, like, God can make a miracle. God can bring her back to life. Like this is not our story. This is not our reality. Like my mom is right here. She's still warm. Like, what do you mean? She's gone. And I remember you saying something similar when you guys were notified about your grandfather.
Yeah, when I think when they tell you certain news, you're like, it's not true. They don't know God the way that we know God. God could change anything in 1 second. Like even if they said it, like it could still not be confirmed. Like you could just pray, and if God wants it, they could be like, oh, we misread the monitor was off, like whatever kind of glitch. And to know that that's absolutely 100% true. God could do that.
And I think what we both said was, the sentiment behind what I'm trying to say is, we expressed our disappointment in ourselves and not having bigger faith.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, God's will be done. And if that's what if God called them home, I accept that now, that there's nothing I could have done or said differently. Because there was, for me at least, how it all happened with mom, like there was guilt. Had I been there that morning, had this happened, had that happened, like thinking that I have any kind of power or control over it, right? But I think through like my counseling and just prayer and everything, I realized like, no, God was calling her home. And there's nothing in this world that would intervene with his will. And I think once I finally accepted that, I was able to get peace. But for the longest time, that weighed on me. I didn't pray hard enough. I wasn't vocal enough. I wasn't this, I wasn't that. And that was heavy to live with that for those years. After the aftermath of all of that, where I remember just praying that I would die every single day. And every day, like the morbid humor, I would laugh at things that I would never dare laugh. But like dark things, like how funny if a bus just ran me over right now. And I would say these things a lot, and my sister would look at me like, don't say that. Like, like, why is that? Why is there humor in that? Why is that even going through your head?
Because you low-key meant it.
I low-key meant it. And I remember when I was in therapy, I mean, I knew better. I don't know if this is what suicidal ideation is, but I never thought about harming myself. Never thought about taking action or anything like that. What I did consistently say, though, is, God, if it is your will, bring me home. Today's a perfect day for that. Every day for probably a year and a half, every single day. God.
That's really scary that you said that for so long.
For so long. And I remember consistently praying this, and I remember people would come and share like what they were going through. Mind you, now it's been a few years, 2 years after their loss and all of that, but I still had zero feelings. Like I was like, everything's meaningless. There's a verse that comes to mind also in Job. And it says, why is light given to those in misery and life to the bitter of soul? That was me. Like, why are you giving me life when I literally don't want to be here? And then, so this is Job 3:20 to 22. So I just read verse 20. Verse 21 says, to those who long for death that does not come, who search for it more than for hidden treasure, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave.
I think that's a little bit of that dark humor that you were mentioning.
Yeah.
Job is basically sharing that same sentiment.
Like, I want to die. Why don't you just let me die? And that was what was consistently going on in my mind for about a year and a half. Like, there is no point in this, everyone. This is not true. This is how I felt. This is the lens that I was looking at life through. But in that season, I felt everyone around me just wants to take. Let them figure it out. I don't want to be the source anymore, as if I was the source to begin with, right? But like, I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to do it anymore, God. And it became a running joke in my head, like, and to those around me who were very concerned about me. But I would say things like, if today's the day where God lets a car run me over, if today's the day where I don't even live near a bus route, but like, if today's the day a bus runs me over.
So, it's so interesting. I'm not going to say funny because this is not funny.
It's not, but this is a little bit of the morbid humor I'm talking about. Like, you find ways to cope through the heaviness of the conversation.
There's this movie, not a good movie. I don't recommend. It's actually kind of boring. Just like, it's a boring movie, but it's called, I think, Into the Wild. And in the movie, it's like this guy, I think maybe he's living in a bus. I don't know. And I think he thinks he's stranded and he's like basically living in the wild. At the end, he literally dies in this like bus thing. He wrote like, I lived a long and happy life. His last words to like society.
Yeah.
But I think if I remember correctly, when the thing zooms out, he was actually like so close to civilization. And I was like, this guy literally thought he was in a desert in the middle of nowhere. And he acted like he was going to die. He died, I think, at the end due to like a lack of food or whatever the case may be. But literally like 1 mile down, like if he would have just walked further, it was like he could have lived.
If he had faith,
And it got me thinking, because every single time there's this running thing in my family where I always tell my mom, like, Mom, if it's my time to die, it's like fine. And she's like, no, you have your whole life to live, blah, blah. But I'm like, but low-key, I'm like, good. I'm like, good. I was thinking of like when I had malaria and I wanted to like literally die. And I'm like, if I could just get a poster board or something to like leave it for my
remember
parents.
You saying your thought was, I can't do this to them. Like, you fought through for them.
Yes, I was so concerned that they were going to say, we let our daughter go on a mission trip and she died.
That would have been awful.
Following God. And I'm just like, I don't know how strong my parents' relationship or faith with God
is.
It will
not be the reason they don't have a relationship with God.
Exactly. I was like, I will not be held accountable for this.
And there's a verse that came to mind as you were saying the whole thing about like the panning out and seeing how close he was. So also in Job, my little notes next to all of these verses, by the way, say, God has a greater purpose for me. And then the other little note says, do not let my grief overshadow my faith. And this verse is Job chapter 4, verses 3 through 6. And it says, think how you have instructed many, how you have strengthened feeble hands. Your words have supported those who stumbled. You have strengthened faltering knees. I'll read the rest in a second, but that was verses 3 and 4. And it made me think of when my friend said, when people are going through it, how beautiful that they see you as a light that God put in their path. Not that I'm like the light, but like a light that God put in their path, right? This verse stood out to me because, yeah, I'm all for all the greatness God can do, but the moment I'm struggling, where's that faith? Where's that hope, right? So then verses 5 and 6 say, but now trouble comes to you and you're discouraged. It strikes you and you're dismayed. Should not your piety be your confidence and your blameless ways your hope? That was very convicting to read that.
Yeah.
And this is basically self-reflection. Like, God's been so great, and you're sitting here wishing your life away. I was blessed with my mom for 34 years. I was blessed to have, we grew up in poverty, but I did not lack love. I did not lack comfort. I did not lack nurture. And one of the things that I recognize now, sharing my relationship with my mom, it's not the norm.
Yeah.
And that was eye-opening because it was the norm in my household. Love left and right. The perfect childhood with what we had.
Your mom made it it was very important for her to make sure her daughters felt nurtured and loved.
Yes. And so after her loss and like sharing my grief with others and then hearing stories about others and like their upbringing, it made me realize like, wow, I was so blessed to have her for 34 years, to have her love, to have her encouragement, to have her uplifting, to inherit her heart and love for God. Like, she would text me every day. She would send me a prayer every day. And maybe we didn't talk on the phone every day, but I always had a text from her. And I saw her at least once a week. Like, we were close. So realizing that that wasn't the norm in a way helped me cope with it. Because it went from I only had her for 34 years to I had her for a whole 34 years.
And I think just like listening to your story and experiences with your mom and how much it hurt, I think hearing about how much it hurt just proves how blessed you are for it to have hurt.
Yeah.
There's so many people that don't have relationships with their mom like that their parents could pass away and they're just like, that's life. And I feel like everyone has different experiences, but for it to have hurt so much, it meant that you had quality.
I keep jumping around, but like, as we're having this conversation, so many thoughts are flooding my mind right now. I'll explain why this story makes sense after. But the story of Joseph. So I think we briefly talked in a previous episode about the story of Joseph where he was the father's favorite. But because he was the father's favorite, he was envied by his brothers. And essentially they plotted to kill him, but instead they threw him in a pit and he was sold to slavery. So he went from being the father's favorite to being thrown into a pit and sold into slavery. When he's sold into slavery, he ends up in Potiphar's house. Potiphar was a wealthy man, and he basically was in a pretty decent situation until Potiphar's wife came on to him and accused him of, trying to take advantage of her. And so then he gets thrown into jail, to prison. When he's in prison, he becomes like the prison manager, for lack of a better word. And so he's coming back up a little, right? And then in that season, he's able to interpret dreams. So then the potter and the baker are released before he is, and he says, please don't forget me. He interpreted their dreams and the dreams came through and they were both released from prison. So after he says, don't forget me, he ends up staying there for 2 more years in prison.
Forgotten
for 2 years. And then he is finally remembered when Pharaoh had dreams that no one could interpret. And then the guy finally remembers, hey, there's this guy in prison who can interpret dreams. Maybe we should go get him.
Yeah.
And so he interprets Pharaoh's dreams. But not only does he interpret his dreams, he has a whole plan on how they will get past the
Years of famine.
the years of famine in Egypt. So then he goes from being in prison to being the second most powerful person in Egypt. All of that built to be in that position.
And I think looking at it from like the outside, we can relate to his life, like the ups and downs, because that's very human. We see all the emotions. But at the end of the day, we could say Joseph was never really forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
Since the day his brothers sold him into slavery, God had a plan and he was building him.
Yes.
Even though, like, yes, people did forget him. Things did happen. He was abused and used, and all these things did happen to him. But the one constant thing that we know, because of where he ended up at the end, is that God never forgot him.
No. And God was with him at every moment of that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that story came to mind is how you were saying, like, my mom's love was essentially a foundation for me.
Yeah.
And so there's beauty behind it all. I think there was, I'm not going to go into details, but there was a person in my life, and that person was going through health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the moment that I realized I needed to snap out of it. Because when I first found out, I don't think I had a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And just to show you how little reaction I had, I think during this season, before I found out about this person, during this season, there was also a moment where I went in for my annual check-in,
Mm-hmm.
and they found a mass in my chest. And so I had to get biopsied. And when the doctor came to give me the news that they had found a mass, you know, super concerned. It could be cancerous. It could be this. It could be that.
Mm-hmm.
And my reaction was so emotionless. It was a non-reaction, actually. I was like, okay, when do you got to do this? When's your next appointment? Like, I asked 0 follow-up questions, because in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
it was almost like an answered prayer. Like, okay, maybe this is God, like, hearing my prayer to die every day, right? Morbid humor, I get it. But I had no reaction. I honestly thought to myself, my mom died. This is the least of my worries.
Mm-hmm.
Like, every time somebody would say something, it was almost insignificant. You had a flat tire and you were out in the rain and blah, blah, blah. Okay, but my mom died. Like, these were literally the sick thoughts that I had. Like, my mind was in such a fog. I remember grandma at the time saying to other people, like, leave her alone. She's not well in the head. Like, that was literally her defense for me, was just leave her alone. She doesn't know what she's saying, because I was just so out of it. And so fast forward to this person in my life who was a very important person at the time, and what they were going through health-wise, I realized at that moment that I had prayed to be numb, but I never prayed for God to awaken again my feelings. And I remember that was the first moment where I knew that something needed to change, where I was like, this person is important, this person is valuable. Like, how am I not reacting to something so serious? Like, maybe I don't care about my health and my life, but like, that was an eye-opening moment to realize that I had 0 reaction to something so significant. So going back to Joseph's story, how all of that led to him finally being in a great position. Thinking back to like all of my mom's love and like all of this emotion that had nowhere to go. All of this emotion that needed a home. And here I was praying to die instead. And we won't go into details, but things didn't work out in this capacity for God's reasons as well. But I think God used this as a vessel. So at the time I contemplated adoption, just because there was so much love, just because there was so much to give and nowhere for it to go. And I think that God used that as a vessel, the idea of that, to bring me out of the dark place, to bring me out of the depression and those ideations that I was having and that will to die.
Like, he planted new desires in your heart.
Yes. And I think when that desire was planted in my heart, I realized I can't be considering this as an option and praying to die every day. God, if God is putting this idea in my head, like, I probably should stick around to be here for whatever God brings ahead. And then I remember thinking, oh my gosh, God answers prayers, and I've been praying to die for 1.5 years. And immediately it was like this harsh reality kicked in. Like, what did I do to myself? Like, I literally sentenced myself. Like, this is, I don't know what I was thinking. Like, all of a sudden, like, my life just like flashed before my eyes, like, something needs to change. And this was around Easter weekend, 2024. I remember making the decision. It's Good Friday. Baptisms are happening. And I literally remember thinking to myself, this is it. This was God's plan all along. Like, I prayed to die. I'm going to die to the flesh. I'm going to give my life to Jesus. I'm going to get baptized and just trust God with whatever plan he has ahead for me. And I remember calling my sister, and normally we go to church on Sundays, but they were having service Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And I remember it was Friday evening, and I said, meet me at church. She's like, really? Okay, like, let's go. And then when I got there, I was like, I'm getting baptized today. And like, her and the girls came, and it's so funny. I might post this photo in our TikTok or Instagram. Haven't decided yet, but I remember the joy behind it all, and just thinking, like, this was God's plan all along, like, giving my life. All of that pain now finally makes sense. God was bringing me closer to him. And I will say God was the only reason why I got out of that season. My relationship with God deepened. I wish I had turned to God sooner in that season. But by the end of that season, I was in my Bible every day. It was part of my routine. It was my lifeline, having turned to Jesus, and like, scripture speaking life back into me and planting new desires in my heart, and just having the will to live and participate in life and open up a window and let a little sunshine in every once in a while. And in the photos, I remember, like, you know, they pray over you before you're dipped in the pool of water. And I remember just being so joy-filled. It was that specific night. There was more baptisms the rest of the weekend, but that specific night, it was a couple, myself, and then this little like 12 or 13-year-old boy. It was like the sweetest thing. I went second, I think. And when I came back up, you know, there's a small crowd and like everyone's cheering and clapping. And I remember like how dorky, but like I love it, because I remember coming up out of the water and literally just standing there, like clapping for myself.
Just like a little girl. Like, I just did this thing.
Like, I did it. Like,
yay me.
Like, yay God, you know? And so I remember, like, I think it's in the photo that I have. I feel like I'm clapping in the photo, like, just so much joy. Like
that would make it so much more perfect.
So much more perfect. I think I'm clapping in the photo. I don't remember, but I do remember finally trying not to cry, but like, it was so emotional, but like joy filled. It felt like life had just flooded me again. And all of the darkness left my body. All of the sadness left my body. All of the depression, anxiety, and sleepless nights. Like, it felt like I was finally letting go of all of that. And I was welcoming the Holy Spirit in. And I was like, God, I'm giving my life to you. Like, I'm not going to die the way I was praying to die. I'm dying to the flesh and being reborn.
I love
and
that.
I think that was his purpose for my life. And now just my perspective on life, like there's light and hope again. There's joy again. There's forgiveness. There's understanding for others again. It's that when you're abiding in Christ, when you're close to the source, it's what pours out of you. And I wouldn't trade that again, because having been in that dark season, that's why that verse is so special to me. He loved me at my darkest. And I think to myself, of all of those people in my life who loved me at my darkest, all of those people that he led and let's stay close to me in that season. I couldn't do life without God.
I always think like it's really hard to do life in general.
Mm-hmm.
And half the time I'm thinking like with God makes it bearable and makes it purposeful and joyful, and everything has purpose when you walk with God because he's a strategic God. Nothing can just get passed by him. He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't miss stuff. Things don't just like say like, oh, I was working on everyone else's destiny that I completely messed up and didn't account for all these different things. Like he accounts for everything. There's a verse in the Bible that says like he knows all the hairs on your head.
Isn't that amazing?
That is crazy. So just I think to know God, and I think about like some of my darkest times, and literally he's literally the glue, the person that like brings me back to a point of gratitude. Because I think when you're in grief, when you're moments of just, I don't know if the word is bitterness, but like maybe more like just darkness.
I'd say bitter and darkness are both accurate.
Yeah. When you're in those types of moments, I think it's only God who can flip the script on you and have you go from finding the root of the bitterness and the darkness is usually rooted in selfishness to a certain extent. And it's rooted in like, you're so focused on you. Everything is like a me thing instead of a God thing.
Yeah.
And that's when God flips the script and he's like, okay, so let's focus on me for a second. What am I doing for you right now? And it's like, well, it kind of feels like you're doing nothing for me right now. And I always picture like God is never not doing things for us. He's always fighting unseen battles for us.
Yeah.
So kind of like your picture where you had said you picture like someone and then like people just like taking and taking and taking. I always picture myself and then like people like attacking, but then God just like covering over. And you're right there thinking like, you're not listening to me. You're like praying and you're like, these are unanswered prayers. And he's like, legit, I'm like covering you right now while you're being attacked.
Yeah.
And I have to think about that all the time because I'm just like, even if things are going wrong, there's so many battles that you fight for me on the daily that I never get to see.
Yeah. And to add to that, I think to myself of the blessings, and I hesitate to share this piece, but it's part of my story. So it doesn't make God less any present in others' lives if their experience is different. So don't get hung up on this detail. But I think to myself, I was blessed enough to have a job that allowed me to take a leave, that allowed me to fall apart, that allowed me to grieve the way I grieved as long as I did, and still be financially provided for and have the means for all of that, because it's not beyond me that that's not an option for everyone. And even some of my siblings who had to get back to work immediately, who had to grieve through all of that loss immediately while they were providing for their families, while they were showing up and having to be mentally present. Like they didn't get to check out the way I got to check out. And part of me being able to check out is because I don't have children and because I didn't have that responsibility. But I do know that God works different in all of our lives. And for me specifically, I think I was able to have the grace that I did receive because God provided that avenue for me to, I was determined to give my mom a year of grief. And we laughed about this recently because my siblings were sharing how they didn't understand how like I just wanted to talk about my parents and like their loss and all of that. And they're like, no, like I actually have to change the conversation because otherwise I end up sad and there goes my whole afternoon just lost in sadness. And me, they were joking. They're like, Sonia, on the other hand, is like, make me sadder. Give me more pain. But the point I'm making behind that is like, take your thoughts captive. And I think I learned the hard way and a little too late that instead of taking my thoughts captive instead of, you know, healing and leaning on God. I was leaning into the sadness. I was leaning into the darkness. And like, this is how bad it was. Like, I used to go to the cemetery and sit there for hours every day. When my mom passed away, after my dad was back at my place, I remember thinking to myself, like, she's alone at the cemetery. Like, that weighed on me so heavy for some reason. Like, she wasn't here anymore. She wasn't there either. But for some reason, I would go to the cemetery for hours, and just like the sadness was so heavy, and it was sick. Like, I was mentally sick in that season, where things weren't logical. It was what it was. And looking back, it's like, I definitely needed God in my life in that season, and the things I was saying, the things I was doing, like, it wasn't me. And I would think now, like, if my mom saw that version, she would have been heartbroken for me too. Like, what are you doing? Like,
yes,
open your Bible, girl. Like, what are you doing?
I think no parent would want to see their kids in
that much pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And including God. Like, I know God, that's not what God wanted for me. And I think my siblings all grieved very differently. And at the end of the day, that's one thing that I think they did better than me, is they took their thoughts captive. And not the only thing, but like, that, the one that stands out to me is they took their thoughts captive and they didn't let the grief swallow them up the way that I did.
I think too, it has a lot to do with grief is a luxury, because I feel like while grieving is horrible, it is a luxury, because I think of moments in my life where I've wanted to grieve, but I'm too busy to grieve. I have things to do, or I have like, and I'm thinking of like your siblings, and they have children, and it's like, when you have kids,
you can't check out that way.
It's not a freedom. Like, you could grieve, but not really, not fully, not ever, because you have responsibilities.
Yeah.
And there's these kids that are just like looking after you. And sometimes I feel like that's good to keep busy when you're going through things, but it could also be unhealthy because you never fully get to process anything. But I think God, in a way, was kind of giving you the luxury of grieving.
Yeah.
It is a painful, sad process, but I think he's like, that's exactly what you needed to end up in the position that you are now.
Yeah.
And everyone has a different journey.
Yeah.
Like, your siblings' journey is not going to be your journey.
No. And we were all grieving the same people.
Yeah.
But the journey was completely different for each one of us. Even my sister, as close as we are and like as close as we became in that season, even we grieved differently. Like, she had to show up for her girls, and I was there, I was around, but like, poor girls saw so much darkness, like, within the way I was grieving. I also just thought of going back to like being there for people who are grieving, and, you know, having to show up for kids, for those who have kids. I remember when we went back, so mom passed away over the weekend, and my sister had come to this side of town, and I think it was like Monday or Tuesday that we made it back to her place, because we hadn't told her girls yet. We didn't tell them that night. We let them have a good night's sleep. And the next morning, we told her girls what had happened. And so, like, everyone's a mess that morning. We're out of it, completely out of it. And like, dad's still in the hospital and all of that. And I think it was 2:00 in the afternoon when the girls were like, is anyone going to make breakfast? Like, we're hungry. And my sister and I both looked at each other like, oh my gosh, like, I thought she fed them. I'm not hungry. She thought I fed them. She's not hungry. Like, we were just completely out of it. So it just made me think, like, if you're wondering how you can be there for others in that season, it may sound maybe insignificant or not as important, but like, your presence. You don't have to say anything. Don't ask people how you can be there for them. You're making them think. Like, don't do that. But like, my brother's church started a food train for him and the family that was in town. And I thought that was beautiful, that different people showed up to the house and made sure that they had a meal every day. My sister and I were back and forth. So you didn't know if I was in town or out of town in that season. So all of my friends did gift cards to like delivery services or just restaurants that would deliver. So that was extremely helpful. And that day when we didn't cook, I remember just reaching in my bag and like being so thankful that my friends had sent that. That was support, because remember, when someone's in that much pain, and I mean, I'll take a sidestep, and maybe it's not even loss or death in that sense. Maybe it's a different kind of loss or a different kind of grief. But like when you're in that mindset, you're not taking care of yourself. And it just brings me back to your circle matters. If you are married, choosing the right spouse matters. And these are the people that are ultimately going to uplift you in that season and be your source of light and hopefully point you to God when you are grieving and going through such darkness in your life, because there's so much going on in your head. You're not thinking straight. You're not sleeping well. So think of someone making decisions when they're sleep deprived and exhausted and full of emotions. Like, there's no clarity. Everything's a fog.
It kind of reminds me how like certain medication, when you take it, it says do not operate heavy machinery. And I feel like they're saying because you're not in your full senses.
Yeah.
And I feel like grief is kind of like that. You're not in your full senses.
So my therapist diagnosed me with complicated bereavement. And what that means is there's a cycle of grief. And I think there's 7 steps to grief. It's five or seven steps of grief. It's like acceptance, denial. I don't know them off the top of my mind, but there's like 5 or 7 steps of grief. This type of bereavement is when you're interrupted. The cycle is interrupted when this tragic, traumatic thing hasn't gone through its full cycle and a second tragic, traumatic thing happens. And in my case, it was multiple tragic, traumatic things that happened. So the way he explained it is my body shut down. Like my mind shut down. Mind actually makes you forget because you can't handle the pain. It makes you, so that's why that whole season for me is a blur, because there was so much pain going on. There was no way to cope through it aside from deleting it. And there's a lot of it that I don't remember. Sometimes like randomly, I don't know that people believe this, but it's a thing. Look it up. Like I will remember things and I don't remember the order that they happened in. So I also have no timeline of it.
I feel like this is a common thing for, it's an actual thing, and it's common for like kids with really bad trauma in their childhood. And when they're asked like, hey, tell me about your childhood, they can't recall because their mind just like literally shut down.
Yeah. And that's exactly what this is. And the only way out of it is with help. Otherwise, your mind cannot logically skip the beat or skip into the next part of bereavement and grief, because you're stuck in this cycle and you don't know how to get out of it without help. And yes, therapy helped. And I was going to a Christian-based counselor, fortunately, so that helped. But ultimately, what fully pulled me out of it was God. And like, for me, I feel like understanding how my mind works, understanding how the body works, helps me, because I don't know, I just have this need to know things. But like that helped. But at the end of the day, as much as it helped to know, it didn't fix. And the only thing that actually fixed and healed was leaning into God, leaning into the Bible, and letting that be the source of my healing.
I think because there's one thing with knowing and another thing with understanding. Like someone can say like, this is the answer, and you're like, I know that's the answer, I just don't understand how you got there.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times like biology, science, that it offers us the answer.
Yeah.
But I think having a relationship with God helps us understand, get perspective on it, and arrive at the answer. And we're just like, oh, okay, God helped me process a really hard area in my life.
Yeah.
And now I'm here.
Through this episode, my hope is for both sides to understand, those of you who are grieving and going through a really hard time. Just know that there is hope and God will bring redemption through this pain.
He will finish the good work that He started in your life.
Yes, exactly. And then on the flip side, for those of you who may not be the ones personally grieving, but are seeing a loved one go through this pain, the way you can be there is just be present. Don't wait to be asked. Just do things. And you might feel like you're overstepping, and certain things maybe you are overstepping, but
if you're like Sony, she will tell you.
Yeah, this is true. If you're like me, I will tell you, like, you're in my space. I don't want you to leave, but you are in my space. But sit in silence.
Sit.
Oh my gosh. God forgive me. I apologize to her. I promise I apologize to her after. But I think that's the kind of friendship that one can only hope to have, is someone who's going to see beyond your actions and realize the season you're in is not you. And I feel like the people in my life who saw beyond that were the people that are meant to be in my life, because they knew that's me acting through pain, not the me who they know me to be. And I feel like having grace for your loved ones is crucial, and understanding that maybe they don't have control over those feelings or over those emotions in the moment. But at the end of the day, let your love shine through. Let your light be a light for them in that dark season, and point them back to God. Pray over them. If they're not allowing you in their circle at the moment, pray over them. Be there for your loved ones grieving. And for those of you who are grieving, the sooner you turn to God, the sooner you'll find hope, the sooner you'll feel light in your path in this dark season.
And I think it's also important to know that when we're grieving, we sometimes feel like we are feeling all these emotions by ourselves and no one else understands. And Jesus does understand, because Jesus walked this earth. There's the shortest verse in the Bible that says Jesus wept. And that's when He wept for His friend Lazarus, kind of showing us that He deeply understands the way we feel and how we process things. So sometimes when we're grieving, we're like, maybe I'm grieving too long, or maybe I'm grieving not enough, or maybe I'm not doing it right. I think it's important to know, like, that doesn't matter. What matters is that wherever you are in your walk, whether you're starting off in grief, you've been there for a while, Jesus understands.
Yeah. So we really hope that today's message blessed all of you. And we encourage you to reach out to us if you do have any questions or topics you'd like us to dive into. And you can reach us at connect@faithtalkpodcast.com.
And this was Faith Talk with Val
and Sony.